Her energy is very light. It's very uplifting. She's great for depression. She's great for getting out of ruts or feeling stuck. She's also very, very good with positive thinking.
Anybody ready for the story? Somebody is. Okay, so there's a little story about how she came to be. So once upon a time, there was a forest. And just as Malcolm was saying, there was a time where the caste system was very divisive, right? And so this is sort of like she was born into this story of divisiveness, and this is how she became in the end someone who transcended that divisiveness. So it's really good for this removing of divisions. So once upon a time, Mr. Matang, just Matang, lived in the forest, and so he was said to be of a lowly caste, but he had the desire to be elevated to a Brahmin, to be doing only spiritual work, and he really wanted to have that karma. So Indra came to him and said, well, you can worship me. So Indra is a great god. Malcolm, maybe you have to elaborate on him. But anyway, so he decides to worship Indra, and he does a lot of sadhana, and Indra says, this is going very well. Now I would like you to worship Saraswati. And he sends Saraswati, who is the very sattvic version of the goddess of art and learning, to Matang. So Matang starts to worship Saraswati, who's like appearing before him. And so Saraswati teaches all about ancient wisdom and the scriptures, and also about music, right? This is why we see the symbol of the Veena. And then oftentimes there's a scroll and writing and mala beads. So all these mystical, spiritual, Sanskrit kind of teachings. And Indra was so happy, and Saraswati was so happy with him. The Saraswati said, hey, Matang Rishi, she's already like feeling like he was getting elevated to this new stature. I am going to come and be your daughter. So Saraswati decides to come and be his daughter. So it's kind of like he had the boon of giving birth to a daughter who was really of the most highest of the most high, right? Saraswati. And because he was from this, it's called Chandal caste, this like lower caste in that system, he was just like a tribal villager, right? Living in the villages. And so because of that, his Matangi is the daughter of Matang Rishi, right? Matangi means daughter. So his Matangi actually had the flavor. She was sort of like the forest girl meets Saraswati. So I kind of like this energy. It's sort of like the Rasta Saraswati, which is kind of funny because Saraswati herself is nothing at all Rasta, right? She's like on a swan, all in white, definitely got a sense of like purity and kind of absoluteness to her. Whereas the energy of Matangi, who is basically an aspect or a re-embodied form of Saraswati, she has this like forest energy. She's like, but she's definitely aligned with all the teachings and creativity and art. She just has this extra quality about her, which is that she's accessible to all beings, and she teaches us not to distinguish just by the outer appearances of people or beings or animals, or right. So one of her big lessons with this knowledge is to see the oneness in everything. And so I just kind of like her because she doesn't adhere to such strict rules. You know, she's got this tribal quality to her, and she's also known to be of the intellect. So it's an interesting lot of qualities, right? She's the heart, she's speech, she's also the intellect. Her name Matangi comes from Mati, which is intellect, right? So she's like, you can worship her by chanting Sanskrit. Like that makes her happy. All of the ancient scriptures make her happy. And yet she has her own way of expressing things and being creative. And so she's a lot to do with the heart. And she's also a lot to do with the throat in terms of expression. So we often think of her as residing in the heart, right? The spaciousness of love at the heart. But there's like a secondary quality here because, you know, when I was, you know, when I'm working on different book projects, I'm really, really drawn to Matangi. Like that yantra is just like sitting right there on my desk the whole time because I feel like it's an unusual subject that I'm writing about, right? I'm writing about yantras. So it's unusual. So Matangi is a more appropriate energy for me to be working with. It's like, how do I express? She's all about expression, manifesting. And then we have this sense of how it might feel or how it might come out. But then when it's manifest, it's the thing that we all get to hear. In yoga and tantra, we talk about the sound being nada or nadam, right? The manifest sound of the subtle sound that's inside you. So when you're playing that veena inside you, you feel sounds coming from inside your subtle body. How is it going to appear, manifest? So she can help you with that expression and really have something tangible. So there's something here about tangible sound. And we've been showing the bird a lot, right? The bird is even in the Yantra Mandala. She's always seen with this green parrot on her shoulder. And so some descriptions of that parrot are the say that she sings beautifully in a human voice. Other people say it's more about some expression, right? A bird manifests and makes the sounds. So it's no longer inside you. It's actually your ability to make something manifest. So if you have like anything creative going on inside you and you're like, I want it to become something, could be anything, right? It could be anything. It's a good energy to, it's like supportive. So it's very positive, back to the positive, affirming. Not only does it attract things to you, but it also lets you create something that's attractive to other people. But there's this interesting quality with colors and the theme of it being kind of, and we don't call her generally, maybe when Malcolm steps back in, you can talk to me about the gunas. You know, Saraswati we think of as very sattvic, right? The sense of purity. And oftentimes when we look at Matangi, I see a little combination of the other gunas, you know, but when she's described as being less sattvic. All right, so what do you think about those gunas, Malcolm? Any comment?
Yeah, so it's interesting with Matangi, kind of who you ask. So one of her attributes you brought up, you know, the forest, her green color a lot of times is the green of plants, on the green of the forest. So she symbolizes that sort of unbounded beauty of nature and that sort of fertility of mind. So when you're thinking about it inside, what that becomes then is the fertility of your own mind, your sort of inner creativity, this boundlessness to the creativity. So when it comes to the gunas, it's interesting. Some people describe her as being leaning more towards the Rajaguna because she has so much to do with creativity. Not just human creativity and artistic sort of outpouring, but the creativity in the cosmos itself. And that piece is sort of revealed by her name. So she's frequently called Uktrishta. Lots of times and traditionally, people will translate the word Uktrishta as being impure. So if I have a piece of fruit and I take a bite of it and then I go to hand it to you, traditionally in Hindu culture, it's touched the saliva inside of my mouth. So now it's ukchishta, it's impure, and it's improper to offer to a deity. And it's improper to offer to another person to eat. That's considered very polluting, to offer anything that's touched your mouth. So if you've been to India, you'll notice that people, if they're drinking out of something, they never touch it to their mouths. They'll pour the water into their mouth, or they'll drink in such a way that they pour the contents of the cup into their mouth, being very, very cautious not to touch the edge of the cup or the bottle to their mouth if it's something that you're going to share with other people, because that is uktrishta, it's impure. So she's called Uktrishta Chandali, which gives you some interesting clues to her nature there as well. So in the tantric context, I think of it this way: is she an outcast or is she an upcaste? So there's lots and lots of ways to not fit into society. And there's lots of reasons to not fit into society. You cannot fit in because you are marginalized and you are in a position where you are forced to function below what is your optimal, and you are thwarted from fulfilling your aims and your needs. Or you might be brilliant and in a class all of your own. That also makes you an outcast. So you think about someone like Nikola Tesla. His intelligence was so much higher, and his visionary ability and his understanding of things was so much more developed. There are very, very few people who could develop the alternating current in their imagination. That also makes you an outcast. You function at a level that's higher and above or outside of what the norm is. So there's different ways of being an outcast. So when you think of the idea of ukchishta, the way that we look at it tantrically, it doesn't mean something that's impure, it means something that's left over. So a lot of times in tantric ritual, they will use what's left over to offer to Matangi. That's normally considered very, very impure. So if I cook food yesterday, I eat some of it, put it back in the refrigerator, taking that out, ew, that's just nasty. You don't offer that to a deity. A deity like Matangi will accept that. When you realize what the ukchishta means, it doesn't mean impure in that way. If you look at it as that which is left over, how we interpret that is, after all of the outpouring of the divine has created the cosmos, what's left over is the divine power itself. So what that's indicating about her is her creative power is unbounded. She can create the entire cosmos out of the Sanskrit alphabet, and she's still left over. She's not diminished by that. She is the leftover, not because she is low and impure, but because she is high, because she is undiminished and all powerful. So she can give and give and give and give and give and never run out. She's always ukchista, that which is left over after everything has been offered. So she offers the entire cosmos to you, and then she's still left over. She's undiminished. So that's what makes her uchishta, because she is so high, not because she's low. So there's all these sorts of plays on words and plays on understanding of things that are a part of the tantric tradition that reveal certain things. You're supposed to think about these things and think about what's being said and look for the deeper meaning. Because the surface meaning and interpreting it literally is rarely the intended meaning of what's being said or what's being presented. You're supposed to contemplate like that. So more things to think about as you color in the yantra and think about some of the attributes. So basically she removes your otherness, your tendencies, the 8 primary ways that we tend to push other people away and make them other and fear them, doubt them, judge them, so on and so forth. She removes those sorts of things. And in removing them, the energy of your heart automatically expands. And so when it expands and expands and expands and expands to a point where that energy becomes overflowing, then the Shakti rises up to your throat and you begin to express these things. So that's the connection between the heart center and the throat center from Matangi deals with the fullness. So once your heart is full enough to overflow and open up, the Shakti rises up to your throat and you begin to express that. You begin to share that with other people. And then when you overflow that, then the Kundalini comes up to the third eye, and then you're in a completely different place and you start to work with Varahi. Then the path shifts again.
Question.
Yes.
If one is going to do a mantra with one's yantra, what should we do?
The very simple mantra that will put you in touch with her energy is the bija mantra, Aim.
Okay, so I put that in the chat if anybody's wondering.
So Aim is a great bija mantra that will connect you to the energy of Matangi.
And you can gaze at the central dot, the center of your yantra. That's where Matangi lives, in the bindu.
Sarvajanam me vichamanaya swasaklim Aim Srim Hrim Aim.